So scientists actually gave us the key to making fat mixes back in 1933 with this graph. And it's gonna show us that loud mixes, smoke detectors, and crying babies all have something in common, and evolution actually tells us how to make fat mixes. So I wanna start off with a test. Which of these two mixes sounds louder to you? We've got mix 1 on top and mix 2 on the bottom. In the air, So it sounds, to me at least, like mix 2 is a lot louder than mix 1, but if we actually check the loudness meters, something interesting is happening. So we're starting off with mix 1, and if we check the levels here, it's at around -7.4, -7.2 RMS. And then if I switch to mix 2, wait a second, it sounds louder, but it's actually peaking at like -7.6 RMS. It's quieter on the loudness meter, but sounds louder. So mix 1 up here is the rough mix that a client sent in. He sent me the track to mix. And then mix 2 is my mix and master of the track. The track itself is called In the Air by Spoke. I'll put the Spotify link for it down below. But let's get into how I made it sound louder without actually changing the master volume at all. And the key is actually in this graph. So almost 100 years ago in 1933, these guys, Fletcher and Munson, found out that how humans perceive sound not only changes by frequency, but it also changes by volume too. So let's start with the frequency part. It'll make a little bit more sense. So I'm gonna take a simple sine wave and I'm gonna move the pitch around. And notice down here, I have a volume meter that's gonna tell us how loud the sound is. So notice how at different frequencies, the volume, the level actually doesn't change at all. There's a big misconception around mixing that low frequencies are actually muddier than higher frequencies, but this shows that's actually not true. They're the same volume across the frequency spectrum. What this actually shows is how we perceive sound, how loud we feel like it is, changes at different frequencies. I bet this frequency, I bet that sounds a lot louder to you than this frequency. I bet you can barely hear this frequency, but the volume between the two actually isn't changing at all. So we actually hear things a lot more like this. If you look around like 3,000, 4,000 hertz, we're a lot more sensitive to those frequencies, but if you look below like 100 hertz, our ears are a lot less sensitive to those low frequencies. So if you check the smoke detector in your house, it would sound like this. It would be peaking right around 3,000 hertz, because that's where our ears are the most sensitive to those frequencies. And our hearing didn't evolve this way by accident. If you look at a baby crying, a lot of those frequencies are concentrated right around that sensitive area, so a mother can hear her baby crying if it's in danger. Or like, let's say you're a caveman from tens of thousands of years ago, and a predator might be approaching you from the woods. You might hear like a twig snap. Or you might hear another animal creeping up on you, like rustling the leaves. Or you might hear a snake hiss. So our hearing actually developed this way for survival, and you can use this evolutionary knowledge to make fatter mixes. So back to these curves, they show us how our hearing changes at different volumes. Like let's take a point right here. So if we put a point here, it means there's a 60 decibel loud sound at 1,000 hertz. So it's just like a sine wave, like I showed you earlier. If we were to move the pitch of that sound down to 100 hertz, we'd get this dot. And that would mean we'd need to turn up that 100 hertz sound over 10 decibels just to feel as loud as the sound does at 1,000 hertz. But this changes at different volumes. Like let's say we have a sound at 10 decibels loud at 1,000 hertz. For that same sound, if we move the pitch down to 100 hertz again, we would need to turn it up over 30 decibels higher than it is at 1,000 hertz, just so it feels like it's the same volume. So these curves really show us how our ears play tricks on us. So how did I use this in the mix that I showed you at the beginning of this video? So this is the actual project where I mixed the track, and the first thing that wasn't hitting me hard enough in the rough mix was the kick. It just wasn't cutting through enough. So it's really lacking punch in like our sensitive hearing areas, like up here. So I ended up swapping that out for a new kick sample. And this one comes through a lot stronger in those sensitive frequencies. Now let's bring in that main synth sound. So you can see it's pretty concentrated in these lower frequencies that just by default we're not going to be able to hear as clearly. So if I really wanted this melody to stick out in the mix, I would have to make some pretty drastic changes. So I'm going to boost the mid-range a lot. And I actually want to leave some more room for the bass, so I'm going to turn these frequencies down. And if I want to push it even more, I could push up those really sensitive frequencies around like 2,000, 3,000 hertz. But now I want to add in the bass. And you can see the bass is really concentrated in these super low frequencies, like down at like 40 hertz. And that does sound good on like music festival sound systems and nightclub sound systems. But for most people, they're not even going to hear that frequency. So it's just muddying up the mix. So we don't need that quite as loud. I'll put this in linear phase mode so we keep the same phase. And then just so I can hear the bass a little bit more on like phone speakers and AirPods, I'm gonna boost this area. But at the same time, we don't really want the bass getting in the way of those low chords. So you guys have seen me do this a bunch, but I'm gonna sidechain this bass to the chords and we'll create a new spectral EQ band. So now every time those chords come in, it's just ducking those same frequencies in the bass out of the way so they fit together more like puzzle pieces. And just those simple EQ changes end up making a huge difference. So this is what those layers sounded like before and after. So I might have pushed the main synth too hard, but it's to give you an idea of how we can balance the frequency spectrum so it appears louder without actually being any louder. And the fact that we know our hearing sensitivity changes at different volumes, what that means is while you mix, you should never just listen at one volume. Like some of the time you should be mixing while you turn the volume down and it's really quiet, and other times you should crank the volume and see how that sounds. So you should always change the volume around while you're mixing. And I actually just came out with a brand new mixing course. I completely redid everything from scratch and included the most modern mixing techniques. Also, you can make mixes that sound as good as the biggest artists in the world. So because I'm launching it right now, and because it's Black Friday coming up, you'll get $50 off automatically when you check out for Black Friday. So you can go check it out at bigzcourses.com. I think it'll really help you make the best mixes of your life. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.